All right, guys, welcome to another live stream. This is actually going to be a global conflict live stream, interestingly enough. So the plan is to, I don't know, to update you guys on the conflicts, right? One of the things that I feel like I haven't done as much has been some of the map updates, right? We haven't taken a look because there's not been like tremendous changes, but I still feel like talking about where the fighting is heaviest, what sort of the strategies are, kind of the meta of not just the Ukraine conflict, but also the conflict in Gaza and the Houthi in the Red Sea. So thank you guys as always. Of course, you can tell the YouTube algorithm that this is good content by throwing me a like. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you can do that. So yeah, good to see you guys as always. And yeah, we are definitely gonna be talking about all of it. Calmore fired up with 4 pieces of strike gum. I can't endorse that level of caffeine consumption. I don't know what's actually the dangerous level for human beings in a day. I kind of want to look that up now. How much caffeine is too much in a day? 400 milligrams. Oh, you guys, 4 pieces is fine. 90 milligrams a pop. Yep, you're comfortably under that. So, good stuff. Yeah. Interestingly, there's also talk about the Navy SEALs that went missing in off the coast of Somalia. So, yeah, that's we may talk about that as well. So, what do you guys want to do? What do you guys want to cover first? Just let me know in chat what stories you want me to talk about first and foremost. Also, of course, people are like how cold is water? It's not. This is caffeine. This is good old coffee, right? The mic picks up the strike gum like a lot when I chew it, so I can't. Okay. Interestingly, so the first question seems to be the SEALs. Everybody wants to hear the SEALs. All right, let's talk about them. So, guys, this is the story. 2 Navy SEALs missing off the coast of Somalia. This is in the Gulf of Aden. The story is that 2 U.S. Navy SEALs were missing off the coast of Somalia after having fallen into the water during a nighttime boarding mission on Thursday. Right, SEALs fell into the water one after the other while boarding a vessel by boat. Right, for SEALs, it's standard protocol to jump into the water to rescue a fellow SEAL when they fall overboard. But the search is continuing. Right, ships. So here's the thing. Let's get on a map. We're gonna take a look at the Gulf of Aden. We're gonna talk about what I think they were doing there, what I think they were doing specifically in this operation, and of course what the risk is. Right now, here's the thing. So Gulf of Aden. All right, let's get this. Let's close this off here. Okay, so there we go. All right, so here's the Gulf of Aden, and here's Aden. Gulf of Aden. So you can see it is in the opening leading to the Red Sea, right? One of the more controversial, one of the regions, and particularly this region here, it's one of the most dangerous, right? It's the narrow passageway where Houthi rebels have been trying actively to sink commercial vessels transiting through here. And you see it's so narrow that if they could succeed in sinking a commercial vessel in the Mandab Strait, it may actually block the Red Sea entirely. Because remember, these ships have deep keels and they need a lot of water to safely transit So if you can just, there's only a narrow point where it's known for sure that it's safe to transit. Remember, commercial vessels, they're not like military vessels where they go, oh, let's assume some risk. These commercial vessels are risk averse. So, right, this is sort of the narrow stretch. And we know that U.S. Navy ships and UK Navy ships have been active in this region, deterring and shooting down efforts by Houthi rebels to sink these ships. But the Gulf of Aden has a lot of other threats out there. You can see in and around this region, Djibouti, but of course here is Somalia. And the danger is, of course, that Somali pirates and not just, so you have pirates, of course, but the also, I think, fear would be that from these points here may also be launched extremist groups who may also want to make a name for themselves by seizing some of these ships, right? Especially, it may be a more target-rich environment because ships may be pausing somewhat on their transit through the Red Sea. Let's see if I can look up the maritime traffic map, and we can take a look and see if that is indeed the case. So you can see here that, yeah, it actually looks quite a bit like that. You can see there's this cluster of vessels here, and I don't know if this is normal, but it looks like these are almost standing by, waiting to transit. This looks very systematic, right? So it looks like this is kind of the holding point, and then they transit quickly through a very narrow channel through the Gulf of Aden, through the Strait, and into the Red Sea, where things kind of separate out and get a little more dense. So I really do think that to the U.S. Navy and to Navy SEALs and to Somali pirates and terrorists, they may look at these cluster of vessels that are just sort of sitting here, and they may say, you see tankers and cargo vessels, they may see a target-rich environment. So what does the U.S. Navy do about this? Well, they're going to have their Navy SEALs conduct some serious operations, again, in and around this region to probably preemptively stop these Somali pirates from operating. So I hypothesize that sometimes there may just be fishing boats, right? You're a Somali fisherman, you go out, you fish, but the only way to find out if a boat is a fishing boat or a boat is hostile pirates who may be trying to seize a commercial vessel is to get on the boat, board it, and talk to people. And of course, that is firmly the purview of the U.S. Navy SEALs, especially if it turns out they're Somali pirates. So imagine, right, you're a Navy destroyer, for example, and your radar picks up, it says, hey, listen, we actually have a sense that out here in the middle of the night, a small boat is moving, has left port, and is moving towards these commercial vessels. You're going to have your Navy SEALs conduct some boarding operations. And the likely outcome is that the SEALs were, my guess is that the ship was probably already stopped or disabled, right? The SEALs were probably approached on a dinghy or small boat, conducted kind of these boarding operations, right? Boarded the vessel, or were crossing a ladder, crossing over to board the vessel. But remember, these are two small boats in a big ocean. So it doesn't take much. Just one person losing their footing on a, which can happen on a rickety old Somali boat. They fall in. Remember, SEALs are going to have a plate carrier. They're going to have a, their weapons. They're going to have their gear. And so they go overboard, and that's a lot of extra heavy weight that's going to pull you down. And so when you have that risk, I hope they would wear life jackets, but if you told me the Navy SEALs refused to wear life jackets, I would absolutely believe you. So I suspect these SEALs got on the ship. It had some kind of slip and fall type incident in the night, and then one of them goes overboard. And as they point out in this article, the standard policy for SEALs is to, if someone, right, the SEAL standard protocol, jump into the water to rescue a fellow SEAL when they fall overboard. So one person probably went overboard, the other one went in. The reason probably for this policy, here it goes, is here, The reason for this is, let's say SEAL number 1 falls in, hits his head, is unconscious, or is wounded and unconscious. That second SEAL, who is physically intact, is going to jump in and can at least hold the other person and still have the wherewithal to do things like signaling. And what should happen is that those SEALs should absolutely have beacons, IR beacons, that they can turn on to just flash a bright light that anyone with night vision, they can't miss, right? And so the fact that this didn't happen is kind of bizarre to me, right? Because, you know, the Somalis are unlikely to have night vision capabilities of any substance. So it wouldn't be a big deal for the SEALs to activate these IR beacons if they can. So it's sort of a puzzling outcome, you know, to see 2 SEALs, right? The first one wouldn't shock me, right? You fall in, you hit your head, maybe you hit your head, and that's what caused you to fall in, and you're incapacitated. But another able-bodied Navy SEAL jumping in after them presumably would have the wherewithal to activate their beacon, might even activate their beacon before they get in. And this is something that, like, ground-based Navy SEALs have IR beacons. Let's see if we can find it. We're going to do Navy SEALs boarding training. Let's see if we can find some videos of Navy SEALs doing naval boarding operations. So let's see. Here's one from 2018. Let's see. It's on Facebook, but let's just see if they'll let us do it. Okay. So this is boarding, vessel boarding at sea. Okay, so here is, again, a small dinghy you actually can't lower in via helicopter. This is a training mission, by the way, YouTube. Please don't demonetize me. Right, so they're training. They look like they're rappelling down. But let's see if we can get a gear assessment here. Okay, so here's these SEALs entering. This looks very old, actually. This looks super old. This may not be as new as I think it is, but even these guys probably have IR beacons. Well, looks like they have plate carriers. I can't tell. I can't tell the... Let's see. Let's see if we can get a good shot of these guys. Okay, so you notice what you don't see. Yeah, actually, this is an old school helmet. Yeah, this is out of date. This is too old. Here's Lebanese Army SEALs. Let's see. Let's see if the Lebanese Army SEALs in 2016 can give us some good intel. Oh my gosh. Yeah, YouTube. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but YouTube really slowing down videos now if they see you're using an ad blocker, which is definitely annoying. Okay, wait, let's see. Let's see if we can find this here. Here are these guys. These are Lebanese SEALs, but presumably they have roughly comparable gear. Oh man, okay, these guys are not that geared up at all. But look here, even this dude's got a flashlight on him, right? And it looks like he's got some goggles on his helmet. This is actually an extremely conventional loadout. Yeah, so let's see. Do they not have U.S. Navy SEALs here? I'm really surprised. Again, plate carrier, standard stuff. All right. Well, sorry I couldn't find a better example of the gear they take on, or really like anything. It's a little annoying because I think there's some value here. Oh, wait. We may have one. We may have one. This is a joint exercise with Navy SEALs and Greek commandos. It's still, but if we zoom in, and let's see if we can zoom in here, we may be able to see just what kind of gear these guys are rocking. So you can see they've got their night vision. Looks like M4s. Seeing a lot of plate carriers, a lot of heavy stuff. I'm shocked. You know what I don't see? I don't see IR beacons. I literally dudes in Ukraine, like Foreign Legion guys, are rocking IR beacons. This would be so reckless to not have the best way to signal attached to your head, and to not have a way to float is crazy to me. That is absolutely bananas if true. So if that's true, which would be insane to me, to try to board a ship as a Navy SEAL, and not have an IR beacon on your back or an IR light. Okay, well, here's another still from the exercise. You see it here? I think this thing on the back, right? Let's see if we can open this in a new tab. Oh, it still just takes you to Reddit. You can see this thing on the back here. That, I think, is your IR beacon, right? So if you fall in, you turn that thing on, it starts to flash a light that you can see in night vision from a long way away. And that, to me, is the core, the thing that should let your colleagues, your Navy colleagues, find you if you go overboard. So, but you can see, it looks like, well, it looks like this guy's got it. It looks like these guys have it, right? And this is very standard, right? This is the reason it's on the helmet is because a helicopter overhead can see it flash as well. And they will look down and see it and know that this is a friendly force or a member of a friendly force, and they'll know that this is the location. So the fact is that these SEALs were conducting this boarding operation, neither one flicked on their IR beacon. That is weird. That is weird. And it makes me think that maybe the water was really cold and they actually didn't survive long enough. Just, you know, I mean, it doesn't take long for hypothermia to take you when you fall in the water. People don't appreciate that, right? Like, how fast can you get hypothermia in the ocean? Yeah, so it says around 30 minutes, right? For it to, yeah, this is from New South Wales. So even if you're a SEAL, 30 minutes should be plenty of time for you to hit the water, know that you need to ditch your plate carrier, you need to ditch your weapon, and keep your helmet and turn on your IR beacon and wait for help. So so I'll be very curious, very, very curious to get the full story of what is going on here. Because there's more to this. This is weird stuff, right? Again, there's some like details here that just don't make sense. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people in chat are talking about the fact that commercial vessels have, it sounds like they're called float coats, saltwater activated beacons, a whistle, a strobe light, and a GPS signal all inside them, right? You just throw the vest on and you're good to go. Yeah, if there were something like 8-foot swells, it would make rescue difficult. But again, if you're boarding a Somali pirate ship, right, a small Somali dinghy or fishing vessel, that vessel's not going to operate in unsustainably rough seas. You know what you see what I mean? Like the fact that the vessel was seaworthy at all is itself sort of an indicator, you know? And yeah, some people point out again, like if there were really high waves, you wouldn't need to board these small vessels, you know? Oh, interesting. Lewis Cipher points out that it could have been that the SEALs fell off the side of a U.S. destroyer, and that fall was long enough that it would actually, the impact of them on the water would be enough to kill them. But again, if a second SEAL followed them in, and maybe that second SEAL also wasn't thinking, like maybe just leapt off the side of the boat, not realizing that the height was so great that it was going to hurt him, you know, like jumping off onto a high dive. But again, if you're conducting boarding operations, you should already be kind of down. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there is something there's two possible outcomes. One is a pretty reckless disregard for gear, right? Like, again, basic rudimentary safety gear. Because remember, if you're boarding a hostile vessel, like think about it. Like let's say firefight excluded. Let's just say you're a Somali fisherman, it's nighttime, and some rando dudes start climbing onto your boat. Even if you have no hostile intent, you may shove one of them off, be like, get off my boat, bro. Like, this is my fishing boat. That is a totally possible outcome that could happen, you know? And like, yeah, Navy SEALs can swim, but like when you hit the water, you want to have basic safety. You know, you want to have the basic safety gear, a life vest, and the ability to be seen at a great, great distance. So it's a weird one, you know? It's a weird... the fact that they didn't have the absolute basic safety gear, right? And that is a failure of leadership, right? It's not a failure of the individual SEALs. You know, you can see SEALs wear the same gear on operations, and the fact that they don't have the ability to quickly achieve safe flotation is sort of reckless to me. And Arn Ice, thank you for the 77,000 ISK. Oh, that's cool. Iceland. He says, yeah, the sea is merciless and it can kill within minutes if you don't follow safety guidelines, and that can be a disaster at the wrong time. Guidelines that sometimes might seem excessive, but are there for a reason. This is from an Icelandic marine biologist sailor. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's true. And I think the lack of respect by, again, I think it's command. I don't think the SEALs are out there not wanting mitigation. I think they just don't. Sometimes this is a meta gripe here. Okay, this is a meta gripe. What made the special operations community so great, known as being so elite, is because, and the reason they were given such wide latitude in gear and mission choices, is because each mission was so unique and presented such unique risks that to mitigate those risks, they were like, you have tremendous leeway in how you choose to mitigate the risks, right? That's why they said, hey, listen, we want the SEALs to blend in with the locals so you guys can grow beards, right? And you don't have to wear any uniforms. If you think you'll blend in best with Afghan man dresses or whatever we call them, then that you have permission. You have our permission to do it, right? And that was the idea, was unique missions require unique risk mitigation. And because your missions are so unique, you get wide latitude. And at some point, the culture kind of shifted. It, by a lot of accounts, a lot of stuff that I've read, is that some of it became top down, like very, very top down, and became more dictatorial, right? They would sit there and go, you will wear this or that or the other thing. And the other thing is that there's a little bit of a cultural thing that happens. Instead of asking themselves on the mission, what is absolutely essential? What is the best piece of gear for this specific mission? Then instead, it feels like that they're maybe starting to, there's a culture of like cool guy, right? The rule of cool. And yeah, 9 times out of 10, 99% of SEALs can get their cool guy combat tactical commando geardo when boarding a ship. But again, to sit there and go, all right, great, now we've lost 2 SEALs because the rule of cool said that a big puffy life vest is dumb. And it's like, was that worth it? Again, I don't know for sure that that's what happened. It could turn out they all had life vests and the Somalis ambushed them, right? Possible. And that the U.S. is just saying they fell overboard because they don't want combat casualties. Actually, that I think is actually should be in the top list of possible that should be in the top of possible items, possible outcomes. Because yeah, it's true. The Navy and the U.S. does not want this conflict with Houthis to escalate. And so if Navy SEALs are killed by Houthis, U.S. service members killed in direct combat with Houthi rebels, it's a disaster. So instead, we say, well, it could have been a Somali boat in the Gulf of Aden, and the SEALs fell overboard. The end. And maybe they did after they were shot by the Houthis. Highly likely. Not highly likely, but let's file that as a very likely scenario. Missouri Mom says, thanks for the $4.99. Great to catch you live, brother. Love your daily updates. I appreciate it. Thank you. Really appreciate you guys. Yeah. So anyway, the final conclusion that I have for you guys from this is possible outcomes. Something that a number one is they just didn't have the right safety gear because I think of a problem within sort of the special operations culture of like rule of cool, and instead of saying what are the risks and how do we mitigate them with the gear that we have. And then I think number two is just an accident, just a hit your head, fell off the side of a boat, like just an immediate injury to both parties. And then three is that this was actually a more an operation against Houthi rebels that involved hostile fire and resulted in Navy SEALs being KIA, and that the U.S. government, in an effort to not play into the Iranian goal of drawing the U.S. into a conflict, is instead saying, hey, we don't actually, this was a non-combat casualty. This was non-combat. There was no combat. So that's my theory, right? But either way, it's tragic, and I again strongly think that, you know, yeah, I strongly think that there is much more to this story than they're saying as a simple accident. Okay. Sort of the other thing that I thought was really important to talk about, the other major news in global conflict, is U.S. military not letting up its strikes against Houthi sites. So U.S. government issuing a warning to ships to avoid some parts of the Red Sea. I wonder what parts they are. But U.S. CENTCOM called it a follow-on action, but they launched another round of strikes against a site in Yemen that it determined was putting commercial vessels in the Red Sea at risk, probably another launch point for drones. Right, of course, it sounds like this is, like a follow-up, because the first day was 28 locations, more than 60 targets within them, and each one hit with multiple launch attacks. And the U.S. always tries to be biased towards spectacular results to simply send a message. And when you hit all the targets at once, it really sends a message. And there was also, of course, a literal message from the U.S. to Iran that they delivered privately about the state of things, which I'd be very curious to know, since oftentimes there's a public stance, things that can be said publicly, and then there's other things that are communicated, like, hey, we understand that, but you need to get your Houthis in line, like they've made their point, but now this needs to stop. But it is interesting, again, there's Sana'a, right deep inside Yemen, but I want to see if I can find where this last strike took place. Right. Make sure our allies are Houthi. Lawmakers, Democrats. Lloyd Austin said he was still in the hospital. Weird. Let's see if we can find where this took place. Nope. No indications of where this strike was hit. It just says a Houthi-controlled site in Yemen. I would be so curious to know if it was actually in somewhere like Aden. Jose Oliveira, $2. Remember that guy who jumped off a cruise ship? Yeah. Once you go in the water, like, remember, all you have above the water, even if you have a life vest, is a head and maybe shoulders if you're lucky. So, like, it takes just the smallest amount of swells to completely obscure you from vision. It's so hard to do. And it's really dangerous. And again, if you have something like a beacon, you can be seen, right? a big bright light in the dark can really save you. But when you have without that, if you just jump in like a guest on a cruise ship, no life vest, no beacon, it's honestly not even worth the time to look for you. The odds of survival are just basically zero. So again, I thought this was interesting. Of course, the Houthis respond to these strikes by saying the U.S. will pay a heavy price. But of course, it's impossible to know if these are empty threats or not. Never not funny when they're like, this is blatant aggression. And here's the thing that I find really funny is that even though the Houthis are launching large-scale, like, lethal drone attacks, and the US and UK are working tirelessly to shoot down those drones and missiles and ballistic missiles, the Houthis are still like, this was blatant aggression by the United States. Like, bro, your drones are armed, guy. Like, they're taking these vessels out, man. Like, you can't sit there and claim that this is blatant aggression. It's not. It's a response, right? Like, this is like, imagine if this is the equivalent of every day the Ukrainians being like Russia launching a series of unprovoked attacks today. And it's like, well, no, like, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked. But at this point, when Russia attacks, it's because they're conducting military operations against Ukraine. Like, it's not like blatant, shocking aggression, right? Like, so it's a war being fought. And the Houthis would be better off by being like, yes, we are combatants against the United States, and the United States is responding to our aggression, to our conduct of what we see as a war, and with their own warfare. Like, this is the nature of human conflict, instead of like pretending. So, right? Other Houthi officials called the attack barbaric, as opposed to the gentle targeting of, again, commercial vessels of what they say are Israeli ships. But again, no one has shown me evidence that, other than, like, I think one of the 25 ships that were attacked were owned by an Israeli company. The rest of them are just rando ships that they see, and they're like, oh, every ship in the West is supporting the Israelis, and there's no other way. And you're like, okay, boss, okay. So anyway, sorry, I'm just complaining because the Houthis are dry. The Houthis are just dumb. They're just not, and I don't mean this in a bad way. They're unsophisticated actors, right? They're Iranian proxies, and they may not realize just how much they're used as pawns by Iran. Like, Iran is happy to see their proxies lose their lives to serve Iranian objectives, which is, again, to pull U.S. forces into direct combat and make the Israel-Hamas conflict a larger scale West versus Muslim world type conflict. Okay. So here's the other thing I wanted to talk about that I think is actually pretty significant is Israel's Gaza invasion. And I haven't talked about this in a while, primarily because when I talk about the Israeli Gaza invasion, my videos are like 10 times as likely to be demonetized. I get demonetized for showing even like a slight destroyed object in Gaza. In Ukraine, I can show a whole destroyed town. They don't care. It's just the Israelis that I'm not allowed to show a lot of stuff. So, but I think I can show this map. And what's noteworthy about this map is we're coming up on day 100 of the invasion. And as you may recall, the goal of the Israelis is to completely and totally destroy Hamas's capacity to wage war and destroy their infrastructure as an institution. And as you can see, they do not yet control the entire Gaza Strip. And I really tried to find the quote before this got started, but it's been scrubbed pretty good by the internet. And it's the IDF minister was like, we are going to fight as long as this operation takes. 30, 60, even 90 days, we will fight in Gaza. Guys, we are well over 90 days, and it doesn't look like they control all that much of Gaza. Based on this map, it looks like of the Gaza Strip, it looks like the IDF controls maybe 40%. And yeah, they believe that it is like they believe they're making progress, sure. But if Hamas continues to fight, like Hamas wins just by surviving. You know, Hamas is like, oh, we're going to win just by surviving, but the Israelis have to destroy every single one. Somebody says this map is out of date. Let's see if we can find more. Here's Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is probably going to be the most generous. Let's see. Yeah, okay. This is I think this is also out of date. This is months out of date. This is from the 9th of October. It's kind of annoying. I wonder if War Mapper has a better one. Here's GIS. Okay, let's see. Let's look at this GIS map. Let's see. Actually, this GIS map says basically the same thing. That Israel controls, has encircled Gaza, but the Jabala camp and Beit Leha is still not under IDF control. And basically this has large portions of the south not under IDF control. But again, even if this is tagging a bunch of weird shit. So, you know, even if you take all this as true, Israel doesn't control much of this strip. But what's also really important to know is that the IDF here, they assess control of an area, but I don't think they actually control it, right? You don't have, I mean, the density of Gaza is such that, and the tunnel network is such that even if they ostensibly cleared a block, there's not much stopping Palestinian fighters from re-entering that block, you know? And the fact is that the longer this fight goes on, the slower the IDF goes, the more time Hamas has to move their key personnel out of the Gaza Strip, smuggle them out one way or another, ensuring that they just need to wait until the IDF leaves again, and then they'll move right back in. So, this is not a road to victory, because again, are they eliminating the Hamas, right? Well, some estimates say that Hamas has up to 40,000 people in the Al-Qassam brigades, right, in their military wing. And the IDF themselves say they've taken out 8,000 combatants, but they also say that there's no distinction between combatants and civilians. So even if you assume generously that the IDF is 75% of those casualties are military, you're still looking at just a fraction of Hamas's total combat capability. So not only is the IDF not really all that close to exterminating Hamas, they also aren't really, they're not really degrading Hamas's capabilities in the future, you know? So, and the longer this goes on, the smarter Hamas gets. That's the other thing to remember. Remember the timeline of the Iraq War, where the early invasion, the U.S. rolled over the Iraqis. And in the 2 years, maybe 12 months after the invasion, it was thought to be like a mopping up, right? There was very low-level attacks, very unprofessional, very not very sophisticated harassment of U.S. forces. And then around the 12-month mark, they got organized. They figured out how the U.S. forces do everything. And then they started to really systematically launch a proper insurgency against the U.S. forces in Iraq, which is, again, a night and day difference when you have an organized resistance. And the key, it's just like in Ukraine. Look, if Russia had gotten to Kiev in 2 weeks, then every lesson that the Ukrainians have learned about fighting the Russians, they would never have had a chance to learn it. I mean, maybe, right, they still would have kept up the fight. They could have had a government in exile, etc. But, like, chances are that if the war ended early, then it wouldn't have given Ukraine, the defenders, the time they need to learn, restructure their forces, learn how to use their drones. And now, right, the Ukrainian armed forces are so good at countering Russian attacks. And the Russians, likewise, are good at countering Ukrainian attacks. But the point is that you need time to go through this learning curve. And the longer this invasion goes on, the more Hamas gets to work through the learning curve. The more they get to share the tactics that work, the vulnerabilities of the IDF, the ways, their tactical blind spots, the weapons that are most effective. The longer they learn about how the IDF moves, how they plan, what sort of routes they take. And when that goes on for a certain length of time, the sides tend to mitigate. So early war, if you're someone like Hamas, your goal is mostly to survive long enough to learn how to actually fight the Israelis. And that's what I think is happening here. I think whether Israel wants to admit it or not, that Hamas is getting smarter, not dumber. And we've seen it, right? Like, they had most of Gaza encircled in, like, North Gaza encircled in, like, the first, 20 days. And now in the subsequent 80, they still haven't taken southern Gaza. So, mission your mom. Oh, God, I thought it was Missouri mom. 490, thank you for the dono. Do you think they rotated out brigades to set up a push south by coming from the east? I think probably, but I think what's more likely is that rotating brigades could be a sign of two things. The first is that this is going on longer than they thought. And that the IDF may go, oh, shoot, we actually do have to rotate brigades, either because they expect this fight to be longer than they realized, and that they need to give the actual soldiers time to, like, go home, right? To maybe they have some policies about how long reservists can be in combat continuously, right? They may also have literal brigades that are materially exhausted, right? So they may be, they may be running so hard that, more than 50% of their Merkavas are broken, right? Either through combat action or even just equipment being run a lot. They may sit there and go, hey, we actually have a lot of soldiers who have broken optics that haven't gotten fixed. We have radios that aren't working. We need to just pull some brigades off the line, put in fresh brigades, and let these brigades off the line get their equipment fixed up and get ready and back into the fight. All right, Dismay Sayer, thank you for the 10, says, thanks for your reporting. Here's to mitigate the demonetization and put in a request for bubblegum flavored straight gum. Okay, I tried some of the with my manufacturer. They're like, hey, we can do some berry flavors. I gotta say, the berry flavors were weird. I was not a fan, but I haven't tried bubblegum flavored. But I think the mint is good, man. I like the mint, but bubblegum flavored would be a good next step. But anyway, if you guys want to try some, we've certainly had a ton of people shouting it out in the stream today. I'm just going to drop it in here real quick. We still have, like, the military discounts. We've got the sign up discounts. So there's still a chance to get your 10% off. And certainly we are working right now to get it into physical stores. Which, again, if any of you guys know, like, a distributor or, have connections or yourselves, then it would be a huge help to help get us into stores. You can reach out via to Dan at combatvetnews.com to help. Again, we're looking for people with, like, direct access. Like, if you are a buyer, or if you own the convenience store or nutrition store or whatever. So, okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, of course, the Ukraine comment. Oh, Bill Hart, thank you. I see a lot of Russian soldiers unalive themselves when I look at combat footage. Is that unique to this war, or something we're just seeing because of the ubiquitous cameras? I am actually not sure of the answer to that, Bill. I really don't. Because Russian society, Russia, there is some weird cultural stuff around suffering in Russia. I don't know how else to put it. So the like, it is not unheard of for soldiers who are critically wounded to choose to end their suffering, right? If they have no chance of rescue, they have no chance of surviving. Okay, sure. But it's weird to see. Yeah, I'm with you. It's weird to see that much of it be filmed via drones. And I can't tell if there is a lot of it more, if it's on the rise, if Ukraine is just releasing more of that footage in order to like damage Russian morale. It's very weird and complicated. But there's also just something about Russian culture around life and death that's just a little different. You know, the average life expectancy for a Russian man is like 60 years old, right? Like, and, you know, okay, so here's the life expectancy for Russia overall, 71 years. In contrast, for example, the United States is, let's see if we can find it here. Come on, are you killing me here? Classic YouTube. Right? It looks, you know, you've got, why does it want to stop? It looks like the U.S. is a smidge under 80. You can see Russia well below China and the United States. But Russian men, let's see, World Bank has life expectancy at birth, male in Russia. You could see it's high watermark, 2019. They lived to 68, which is frighteningly low. And you can see in 94, it was 58. 59 in 2003. And now it's just 64 years old, guys. 64 years old. That's unbelievably young. To give you, for context, Afghanistan, one of the poorest countries on earth, 59. Right? So midway between, you know, Albania, right? 74. Algeria, 75. So they are looking in terms of life expectancy, like in the realm of Armenia or Azerbaijan or the Bahamas or Belarus. I guess it's a client state after all. You know, Bolivia, like Botswana. So the reason I say this is because there's some cultural thing going on, right? The Russian economy could absolutely support longer lifespans, right? But like you can't, how do I want to put this? Like, Americans and the developed world has, had increases. JP says it, hygiene and medical care. And medical care is also medical knowledge, right? Like, hygiene includes things like washing your clothes and, bathing regularly and taking care of your teeth, and preventing infections and stuff. But hygiene also includes some level of, it's the word I want, like personal hygiene, for lack of a better term. So, for example, a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, or with less processed food, or even just less drinking. Those are all things that, like, we know about. You know, if your doctor tells you, hey, you should lose weight, you have high blood pressure, or you're in danger of getting diabetes. Like, a certain percentage of Americans like take that knowledge and then implement it. You know what I mean? So, I think this is a short version. People are like, not drinking yourself to death at 40. Yeah, that's what I'm basically trying to say. Like, in America, in the developed world, it's normal to be like, hey, you guys, statistics say 1/3 of Americans don't drink anything at all. And, let's say another third drink a few times a year, right? So the remaining third are all the drinkers in America. And like, as Richard Harris points out, 1 in 3 men, we looked this up in an earlier stream, 1 in 3 Russian men are alcoholics, not drinkers, alcoholics, right? So that is a huge contributor. And definitely, so all in all, there's this culture of like, you don't live that long, period. Yeah, regular exercise, another thing, right? In America, it's just normal. It's normal and expected for, like, if you're an adult man, like, basically regardless of age, it's not weird at all to go to the gym, you know? UN Vlad Sale, thank you for the 5. I encourage people in the chat to Wikipedia maybe a Houthi flag or Houthi rebel mission statement. YouTube doesn't like it. Okay, I don't know. All right, I want to look this up, right? I'm looking it up off stream because I don't want to. Yeah, okay, I see why I can't repeat those things. Their slogans are exactly what you would expect from an extremist movement. Yeah. Yeah. So the Houthis are exactly who we think they are. Not sophisticated, motivated by very simple things. Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I don't know. I don't know if there's more of these videos, if they're being released more, or if there's just something inherent to like the Russian experience that makes them more prone to say like F it and show themselves out. But what I thought was kind of interesting over the last couple of days is that, you know, the changes to the front line have been really, really minimal. Marcus the Geiger counter pointing out that I wasn't kidding when I said your chances of survival are basically 0. Oh yeah. Yeah. If you that's a reference to if you fall into the open ocean with no life vest and no signaling device, yeah, you're dead with extra steps. Speaking of showing yourself out. But you can see that, you know, in the past couple days, just like the Russian gains have been really tiny. I mean, you can see, like, look, for all their efforts in Avdiivka, they advanced, it looks like a few feet into across a reservoir or something. Like, this is just such a minimalist. You can see they're advancing into open fields, going nowhere, like not really moving towards taking a town. It's a very bizarre. What makes it bizarre is not that there's slow progress. We know that the war is pivoted to defensive, but that Russia, like, what does Russia gain? Like, let's say, for example, that Russia has, over the next 2 months, one of the biggest breakthroughs of their entire eastern offensive, and they make it to Hostre. Okay, zoom out on this war. Does that make a difference, a lick of difference, in terms of the strategic situation? Like, honestly, is it going to make Ukraine more likely to negotiate? Are these towns here, these little podunky towns that have been shelled out of existence entirely, are they really so important that it's going to change the fundamental commitment of Ukrainians to fight? Is it going to, you know, make them want to surrender significant territory? No, right? Like, Russia holds 17% of Ukraine. It has held 17% of Ukraine for the past year, basically, with less than 1% of total territorial change. So the question I always have is, why is Russia still throwing its people at the Ukrainians just for the Ukrainians to kill them, like at scale? It's so weird. It's so weird. It's like pointless. Because here's the thing. Remember, if Putin's goal is to say, oh, I don't want Ukraine to join NATO. Well, okay, you occupy 15% of the country. So, like, and you can't become a NATO member if you're already at war. It's like it's kind of a rule that we won't let you in NATO unless you're an actual member. Like, unless you're territorially intact. So he's mitigated that. There is no chance that he will enact regime change or that he will eliminate the Ukrainian military. So why continue to go on offense? Why not make the Ukrainians go on offense? Like, I don't understand. That's what I don't get. You know? Hanson Redler. Meat waves, the age-old Russian tactic. Busy work for domestic consumption. Possible. I think it's also possible that, it could be just the war machine, like the literal war machine that just goes to go. I think honestly, Russia, I think the rational explanation is that Russia believes that its offensive actions, even though they attrit Ukraine very slowly and they attrit themselves greatly, like Russia can lose 1,000 guys a day indefinitely, right? Because they're a big country. They're banging out. There's 1,000 fresh dudes. There's 100,000, 1 million Russians turning 18 every year. So they can burn 1,000 dudes a day, no problem. Their belief is that if it costs them 1,000 dudes to kill 100 Ukrainians a day, then that Ukraine will attrit before they do. I think that's their belief. They're like, yeah, it takes 2 of our guys to eliminate 1 Ukrainian. We're fine with that because we outnumber them, population-wise 10-1. That's my thesis. Or they just literally are doing it just to make it be less Ukrainian military equipment, like to continue to burn Western equipment so that Ukraine cannot become really efficient and use the equipment it has. But like we talked about, Zelensky was honest in Congress, and then it leaked that Ukraine doesn't need an aid package until February. So right now the U.S. Congress will always play games with lives if there are games to play, right? U.S. Congress has no respect for the sanctity of other human beings. Yeah, David says Russia outnumbers Ukraine 3-1, not 10-1. Yeah, I know that's close to the real number. That's like the thought exercise, right? I'm just picking like easy numbers. Yeah, I think it's closer to 3-1, and I think it's more like the kill ratio may be a bit more even, but I think it's skewing favorably to Ukraine. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the Congress is doing what it always does, which is playing games with lives, and then it'll pass something in February. It'll reach some deal, So anyway, what other questions you guys have for me? All right, we're coming up on an hour. What questions you guys got? I'm here for it. I'm here to Q&A, whatever you want. Yeah. What is the current ration? How many men are in Ukraine to draft? That is a tremendously important question for Ukraine, one of the biggest ones. So here's sort of the problem that Ukraine has run into. Is that one, they have their military, right? It was such an emergency to get people onto the front lines. They said, listen, we just need you to fight until the war's over. That's what their contract said. There was no rotation plan. And now the war's been going on 2 years. They're like, okay, a lot of, no one wants to be drafted and say, you're only going to go home in a box, right? Like the war has no signs of ending. Casualty rates are high. Your only way to come home is in a box. And nobody wants that, right? And Ukrainian men that fled the country are saying, no, I don't want to sign up for this. I don't want to be drafted. And so the problem is that Ukraine now gets 0. They get 0 days of military service. So I think they have to figure out a way to convince these expat Ukrainian men to come back and that they can serve in some capacity that is more palatable to them. Probably I would say a guaranteed 12 months of service. Maybe say, hey, if you come back voluntarily, you can select your job, right? We can offer you non-frontline roles or pseudo-frontline roles. So that's the big question. Arn Arn, thank you for the 750. Says Putin also ensured Finland and Sweden finally joined NATO. Yep, with his continued threats. And both are not to be underestimated in winter and forest battles. You are absolutely correct. Putin really feels like this invasion probably has already backfired, given that he's brought NATO to his own doorstep, invading Ukraine to prevent NATO from coming to his doorstep. Jonathan Dwyer, thank you for the super. Your first super ever. Thank you. So, yeah, I think overall, that is sort of Ukraine's big question, is how do you get these expats to return? And they also probably have to lower their draft age, right? Like they had this weird policy where you're not draftable until you're 27, which on one hand is gets a more seasoned, experienced soldier, which I think could be a good thing. But, you're also, there's a reason why 18, 19, 20-year-olds have been draftees for a lot of history, and it's because physically they're able to endure much better than the average 27-year-old. Understand the idea of being like, okay, we don't want young people, we don't want to have this two-tiered system like the US had in Vietnam, where you were either poor and you had to fight, or you went to college and you stayed safe. So even lowering it to 22 to say, okay, listen, you get your chance to go to university, you get your chance to work a few years, but now you got to come and serve, right? And again, giving people indefinite contracts, like if your goal is to say, hey, you're 18, we'd want you to come serve your country. So say, but we'll let you select a job 12 months after your training is complete. You got to serve on the front lines, and then you get to go home. Then you get to, we'll give you a medal, we'll give you an ID, and you get to go home, right? That's not a bad deal, All right, we're at an hour. Thank you guys so much, all of you, for joining us on this update. This was a really interesting one. Remember to call your congressman. You can email them. I think you can look it up online. Just Google, who is my congressman? Send them an email. Tell them you want to see them pass Ukraine aid, right? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how well that can work. Other than that, check out strikegum.com. Check us out on combatvetnews.com. And El Fuego, thank you. Glad to see the Strike Gum is continuing to help you get through your physical therapy. It does not treat or cure any disease. It's caffeine gum, but goddamn, when you're tired, it's a real pick-me-up. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.